Okay, this is the graph paper resource then, and I'm just going to talk you through some of the options and some of the features. So here on the left is the axes and the grid values, and that just determines how thick it is when you print it out. So the thicker it is, you can see the axes is getting thicker and thinner there. And similarly with the grid lines, the darker you make it, the better. I've defaulted it so that hopefully it looks alright on a printer when you print it out. On the right hand side is how many rows of axes you want and how many columns of axes you want, so you can change those figures to how you want. If you want a really high res version, you'll probably go to maybe like columns 1 or even 2 and then take a screenshot like that when you're happy with your axes. The default is 3 and 3. Now the middle buttons then. So we've got the X initial value, so you can see it's starting at 0 at the moment, but you might have a histogram or something that wants to start at 50, so you can change that to whatever you want. And the X step is just what it's going up on, so I've got it set at 10s at the moment. You can obviously set that to whatever you want if you wanted to go up in 25s and so on. And similarly with the Y scale as well, so it starts at 0, but you might not want to start it at 0, you might want to start it at 5 and then go up in steps of 2 or whatever you want. Okay, I'm just going to reload the screen so it just goes back to the default. The scale size then determines basically how large the tiny little squares are. So if I make it bigger, you can see those little squares get larger and larger and larger, and then as I make it smaller, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think 8's a decent start, but depending on what you're doing, you might want to change it up and down. The partitions is how many little parts each big square is split into. So you can see the larger squares, if I just zoom in a little bit, the larger squares are split into 5 smaller squares each, or 25 smaller squares, I guess. The partitions, you can change that to 10 if you want. And now the more partitions in is the smaller you're going to have to do the scale size, I guess. So I don't know, say if you wanted to do a scatter graph and you wanted every single individual point, you probably want 10 partitions. But it's up to you, you can have it to whatever you want. You can even have those tricky ones where you've got like maybe 4 partitions. So we're going up in 2.5s there. You can have the scales to whatever you want them to be. What else have I not done? The height and the labels are hopefully self-explanatory. So for maybe where it says height, if you're doing a scatter graph, you might want to do the classic shoe size on the bottom against height along the top, for example. And then shoe size 0 to 80 sounds a bit ridiculous, so you probably want to init that, have the initial maybe at 3 and go up in steps of 1, for example. I've just realised I've done the Y scale. That's not what I want, is it? I want it to be 3 and 1 there. And then the height, well, you probably maybe want to start at 50 centimetres and then go up in, I don't know, 10 centimetres. Does that work? If you're not happy with 10, you can always change it to 20. Reduce the scale, increase the scale as you see fit, and increase the partitions as well. So eventually, you're kind of happy with what you've got. So yeah, basically after you play with it around a bit, you should be able to make any graph paper that you want with a few sort of alterations with these values. So hopefully you might find that useful.